everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Under Adria's Wings podcast, Life After Loss. So, today we're going to talk about what grief looks like in children. As you know, the Under Adria's Wings organization is geared towards helping children ages 5 to 17 on their grief journey. So I thought it was very imperative to speak about what grief may look like in children throughout different stages. So grief is different from everyone, of course, but grief in children can be pretty tricky because you don't always recognize it ahead of time, and then a lot of times, just like adults though, kids don't know that they're grieving, and because, you know, the kid they're still children, they're still going through the identity stages, trying to figure out who they are, what's life about pretty much, and then life happens, right? They lose their parent or they lose someone close to them. So when you're younger, when you're like a toddler or a young kid, they tend to have a hard time understanding that death is permanent. So initially, if you tell them, okay, well, your mom isn't coming back or whatnot, they they accept it for the most part. But then don't be surprised if like a month or two later they may say, "Well, hey, when is she coming back? Or is she at least going to show up for the party?" Because you got to look at it too, like in cartoons and on TV, YouTube videos or whatnot, cartoons rather. When someone like dies, they come back to life a lot of times in those situations on cartoons. So if a kid is seeing that, they can they can't separate. So at times they feel as though that person may be coming back, and until time goes on, then it eventually sets in. And then once that happens, that's when you really have to look for more signs of grieving. Like small kids can start wetting the bed, um, seeking more attention, especially doing things to act out because they need attention, because they want the attention that they're missing from that parent or that person who they lost. So also they can start having trouble in school. Their grades can start slipping, or just any kind of circumstances that surround it. But a lot of times, because children are still so young and impressionable, and they're so innocent, right? A lot of times they don't understand what's going on within their body and within their minds, and they can't put it into words. So that's why it's important for adults, older kids, parents, everyone surrounding the kid or the children to be open and talk about their grief and what it may look like, so that when they have these feelings and they're unsure where they're coming from or why they're having it, they can revert back to a conversation that was had amongst an older adult about how they may be feeling during times, if that makes sense. So I mean, it's imperative to have the conversations, and trust me, I know that it's hard to talk about it because as the living guardian, the living adult, or the living caretaker in that child's life, it's hard for you too because there was a connection to that person who is deceased as well. But, opening up and talking about it can definitely help both of you, can help everyone involved, help the entire family. So, feelings don't start to get repressed and suppressed, and, so it's open. So the kid also won't feel like they're different, and that's another thing with grief. some children feel like they don't have anybody to talk to, who they can relate to, who just understands. And a lot of kids, when you're in school, a lot of kids still have their parents, right? A lot of kids still have their caretakers. And if you have events at school like muffins with mom or donuts with dad or whatnot, and that kid is missing that parent and their peers still have that parent in their life, they may feel like they have no one who can relate to them. So it's imperative. I can't stress that enough. I may sound like a broken record, but it's imperative to leave those lines of communication open. It's also beneficial to find therapy, to find peer groups of kids who are going through similar situation that that grieving child is also, so they can feel like they're not alone. And a lot of times the kids, they battle their grief alone because they just don't know. So there's resources out there. My organization helps with it to just to help families and the kids be able to get through the grieving process. And there are many other different ways that kids can grieve, like as they get older, or if a teenager loses their parent or someone close to them, they can act out. It can rebel, or their grades can start slipping too, or they can just shut completely down. And at times, the caretaker may not know how to deal with it, may not know what to do or whatnot, or may not even recognize that it's grief, because a lot of times the kid is not going to come out and say, "Oh, I miss my mom, that's why I'm angry." "Oh, I miss my dad, that's why I'm angry." It's going to be like a lashing out towards the person who's still living and still there with them. So what we tend to do is take it personally without realizing, like, man, this lashing out is probably one of the a grief spell that's coming on. And maybe it's a moment that she misses, hap he or she misses her parent. And what I like to do, and what I suggest doing too, I like to keep a conscious memory, or remember, around holidays, around birthdays, around big events that maybe that that child and the parent were big on. So around that time, if you notice a shift or a change in that child, you'll look at the calendar and say, "Oh, well, this is coming up. Mother's Day is coming up. Father's Day is coming up. Let me go in there and talk, or let me do something, or ask how he or she may be feeling during this time," and just make that kid feel like they're seen. So a lot of times they may not feel seen, they may not feel understood, and we all know that can be the complete opposite. Now, you do have some kids who it really doesn't affect. Like I said, grief is different for everyone. Some kids may look like they're thriving, right? They may keep their grades up, and they may, continue to do great extracurricular activities and things of that nature. And a lot of times, and what I've heard is that they do it because they don't want to let their parent down. It's like, "Oh, I'm gonna make my mom proud. I'm gonna make my dad proud of me. I know she's looking down on me and she's smiling." And they add pressure to themselves, and they go hard. They go extremely hard because they do not want to let their deceased loved one down. And a lot of times, sometimes that can lead to burnout. And it may not happen right away. It may be years, and then that kid just burnt out because they've been trying to prove to themselves and to their angel in heaven now that they're gonna make them proud, and sometimes losing focus on who they are. And I mean, you gotta think about it. As teenagers, we're already trying to figure out who we are. So to have that loved one, that person who created you, gave you life, to leave like that, can put like a halt on your identity phase. So then in preteens, the same thing. Um, Grief can just look so it's so different in kids. And it's why I started this organization because I want to be able to put a magnifying glass on what grief can look like because it's tricky. It's tricky in adults. For me, grief was Man, I didn't even recognize what it was until years later, and a lot of times, in the beginning, I didn't allow myself to grieve. So what happened was that grief and the feelings just came tumbling down on me it felt like at one time, and I went through a period of isolation, and it's hard when you feel like you don't have anybody to, talk to, or you feel like you don't want to be a burden to anyone else by dumping your emotional, mess on them. And that's how I was thinking, right? It's not, an emotional mess. It's not a burden to people who love you. But when you're in those moments and when you're in those feelings of grief, your thoughts take over, and your thoughts tell you things that aren't true. So you look at yourself as a Debbie Downer, or things of that nature. So you go into isolation because you don't want to be bothered, and you don't want people to um weigh on you, and you also don't want to bring your energy around other people. But most times it's just like, I don't want to be bothered, just being honest. But that goes along with kids too. A lot of times, especially in teenagers and preteens, they go through that period of isolation already. Being teenagers, you have teenagers, they go into their room and they stay secluded. But when you're grieving as a teenager, as a child, and you're in that room by yourself or whatnot, that's when the thoughts can take over. And you know what they say, an idle mind is a devil's workshop. And I'm gonna say it again. That's why it is so important to make sure that you if you're the caretaker, or if you're the kid listening to this, just monitor your thoughts, monitor your feelings, monitor things that are going on within you. Journal about it, write about it, talk about it. um the caretaker, look this try to be mindful of that kid. And I know that it's hard because there was there was probably a connection between a deceased loved one with you, and then now you have the child by yourself or whatnot. But for everybody to get through it in a healthy way, it just has to be a lot of togetherness. No one should have to, suffer alone. And I know a lot of times we don't like to talk about it because it's hard, it's heavy, right? But the longer that we keep it bottled in, the longer that we don't want to talk about the hard things, the more severe the consequences can be in the long run. So you want to sort of, gather what you can and keep a good balance of just the grief in life. It's all about balance. So if you can balance it in a healthy way, that is so beneficial to your mental, to your physical, to your spiritual, to every part of your being. And along the way, and as time goes on, you'll become, and the kid will become more comfortable with their grief because, as far as I know, my mom's been deceased 13 years, my brother 14. I don't, like I said in the first episode, I don't see a finish line. Grief is ongoing. Grief is something that will probably never leave you or myself or no one. So you might as well get comfortable with it. You might as well find a good balance with it because, like, it's not going anywhere. And it doesn't always have to be a bad thing either. Once you're comfortable, once you open up, and once you find your tribe who you can confide in, and who you can trust and who you can cry with and who you can do things together. Once you find that good tribe and you keep it, it'll make this whole journey just a whole lot better. And my goal is just to stress that to anybody, to everybody, whoever's listening to this. Like, just you don't have to do this alone, especially if you're a child, a teenager. There are your family, your friends. You are loved. You are worthy, and we're here. Um, and that's how I would like to wrap it up today. And like I said, if you know of any kid or any children ages 5 to 17 who will benefit from our program, if they lost a parent or a guardian, please reach out to us and we'll definitely do what we can to help. Or even if you don't know where to begin, just start, just reach out. Underadriawings.com is the email, I'm sorry, the website. Or you can reach out to us via email at info@underadriaswings.com. But just know that we're here. You don't have to do it alone. If you're the caretaker, we also have resources and ways to help you as well. We just want this grief journey to be as beneficial, as normal, as whatever as possible for you and then the children. So on that note, I would like to leave with a quote. Um, and the quote is, grief is like the ocean. It comes in waves, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes the water is calm and sometimes it is overwhelming. All we can do is learn to swim. And that's by Vicki Harrison. So until next time, have a great evening. Have a great day. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I'll be back next week with another episode. And peace.